Hey guys, it's Eugene from Dreamcore here and we're back with another video. This one's brought to you by MSI and Nvidia. We hope you're watching this video safely at home. It's truly a dangerous time to be out, so please, for the sake of yourself, for the loved ones around you, and for anyone else whom you may meet on the street, please stay home and stay safe. Today, we're going to go back to basics and we'll be talking about FPS. If you already know about that, check out one of these other videos where we review other cool stuff. But this video is for people who want to know how we measure the performance of a graphics card and what that means. Now, let's start by defining some terms. The FPS we're referring to here stands for frames per second, not first-person shooter, the game genre. FPS is the unit of measurement for frame rate, and to understand what FPS means, we have to start by understanding what a moving picture on your screen is made up of. Remember when you were a kid and you were doodling in your notebook in class? If you've ever drawn a ball moving from the left to the right side of the bottom edge of your notebook, you already know how any modern display works. A moving picture is created where multiple images are shown in quick succession. On an electronic display, these images are called frames, and the faster you show these frames one after another, the smoother your moving picture or video looks. Going back to the example with your notebook, imagine if you only had 10 pages of frames to draw a ball moving from the left to the right, and you had to evenly flip through these 10 pages in 1 minute. Your frame rate would be 10 frames per minute, and that would be quite unpleasant because one page would have been shown for 6 seconds before moving on to the next picture. You wouldn't get a smooth video at all. But if you increase the number of pages to 60 and wanted to show them evenly in 1 minute, then these pictures are more rapidly shown. If you do the math, that's 1 picture per second. Comparing 10 frames per minute to 60 frames per minute, you can see how 60 frames in a minute would result in a smoother video. The higher the frame rate, the smoother the video. And this is why gamers want to achieve as high a frame rate as possible. Generally speaking, having a higher frame rate results in a smoother gameplay experience. Some gamers say that having a higher FPS helps them play better, but if you ask me, it's all about getting your gameplay to be as lifelike and as distraction-free as possible. Having a high FPS increases the feeling of immersion and lets you better enjoy whatever experience you're having, therefore allowing gamers to focus on performing well in-game. Having said that, do note that your monitor's refresh rate also plays a part in your experience of your in-game frame rate. For instance, if you're running CSGO at 200 FPS but only have a 60Hz refresh rate monitor, you'll only be able to see 60 of those 200 frames in a second because your monitor only shows 60 pictures a second. Now, on to the golden question. How does one go about achieving a higher FPS? Many things play a part in determining your frame rate, and we'll start with the most important factor, your graphics card. This piece of hardware is by far the biggest determinant of your frame rate. All else considered equal, the better your graphics card, the higher your frame rate will be. But that's not all. Your graphics card needs to drive a graphical load, and for most of you, that load will be games. Now, to understand how games affect your frame rate, we'll use a simple example. Compare two cars. If both cars have the same engines putting out the same amount of mechanical power, but one car is heavier than the other, then naturally the heavier car will move slower than the other. Similarly, games that are more graphically intensive will be harder to drive. So with the same graphics card, a less intensive game like Dota 2 or CSGO will see you getting higher frame rates, whereas a more intensive game like The Witcher 3 or Crysis 3 would have lower frame rates. That's why you often see CSGO players having more than 200 FPS, whereas benchmarks of The Witcher 3 show less than 100 FPS for most graphics cards. Even then, within your game, graphics quality settings affect the load that your graphics card will have to drive. One such setting is your in-game resolution. That refers to the number of pixels your graphics card has to generate or render. Common resolutions include 1920 by 1080 or 1080p, 2560 by 1440, that's 1440p, or 3840 by 2160, in other words 4K. As you'd expect, the higher your in-game resolution, the heavier the load, and therefore the lower the frame rate, because your graphics card has to work harder at a higher resolution, therefore reducing the number of frames it can generate in a second. Similarly, you'll also see a lower frame rate if you set your in-game quality settings to high or ultra, as opposed to setting them to low or medium. That's why it's critically important to understand these factors when choosing a new graphics card. Ask yourself, what games are you playing? What resolution is your monitor? What sort of quality do you want to achieve in-game? These questions will all help you figure out which graphics card best serves your needs. Let's take a look at some real-world examples. A card that we have on hand is the MSI RTX 2070 Super Ventus OC. It sports a relatively neutral design, so you'll find it easy to fit into your new desktop. It comes with a nice solid backplate that'll help with any GPU sag and makes the card feel like the premium piece of engineering it is. Underneath, you'll find two of MSI's award-winning Torx Fans 2.0, which feature two types of fan blades. The dispersion fan blades have a steeper blade curve, which catches air more effectively, and the traditional fan blades help to push this steady airflow to the massive heatsink below, all adding up to exceptional cooling for your graphics card. We'll be running this on our test bench with the Intel Core i9-9900K and ASUS Z370F gaming at BIOS revision 2401 and 32GB of Corsair Vengeance LPX running at 3200 MHz. Let's start with some baseline measurements. First, let's look at how this card performs on CSGO at 1920 by 1080 resolution with the higher settings. As you can see, we're getting an average of about 220 FPS here. Now, if we turn down the settings to the lowest, you can see the average FPS increasing a little bit. We're getting an average of about 250 FPS here, making the same card perform 14% better with a more lenient load. Let's take a look at what happens if we switch the resolution up to 1440p at the highest quality. You can see this adversely affects the FPS, but significantly improves the quality of your video. We're still getting a decent average of 140 FPS here. Finally, let's compare this to a different graphics card, running at the same 1440p resolution at the higher settings. If we throw in the GTX 1660 Super here with everything else being equal, you'll see it performs significantly worse than the RTX 2070 Super earlier. Having said that, you can also achieve a very similar frame rate with the GTX 1660 Super at 1080p as the RTX 2070 Super at 1440p, further cementing my point that there's a graphics card for everyone. You just need to determine the load you want to drive and what compromises you're willing to make. So here are some of my recommendations. If you've got a Full HD 60Hz display and only play games like Dota 2 and CSGO, take the GTX 1650 Super. Even if you're playing more intensive games, you should still be able to achieve a decent frame rate with some moderate tweaking. For a good experience with a Full HD 60Hz display, take the GTX 1660 Super. If it's a Full HD 144Hz display, take the RTX 2060. At Quad HD 60Hz, the RTX 2060 will work very well for most games, and for 144Hz on Quad HD, the RTX 2070 Super is the card you want to go for. If you're playing 4K but are willing to compromise on some settings, the RTX 2080 Super will be good enough. But if you want a nice and smooth 60 FPS at 4K, then the RTX 2080 Ti is for you. We hope you guys learned something by watching this video brought to you by MSI and Nvidia. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications. Let us know down below what you want to see next and we'll see you in the next video. Stay home and stay safe, guys.